I didn't know one forgotten passport would break my entire life open. Sometimes God lets you forget something small, so you can hear something big. I had barely driven 10 meters from the gate when the thought hit me like a slap. My passport. It wasn't in my bag. I sighed, annoyed at myself. I'd triple-checked everything last night, the charger, the work files, even the backup entry pass for the conference. But somehow, the most important thing slipped through my fingers. Maybe that should have been my first warning. I reversed the car, the gravel crunching under the tires. The morning air was still cool, carrying the faint smell of breakfast my husband had cooked earlier. I remember thinking how peaceful the street felt, how ordinary this morning was supposed to be. I grabbed my keys, stepped out, and walked toward the front door. The moment I reached the porch, a strange stillness wrapped around me. Our house was usually full of sound at that time. My husband humming, the TV murmuring, the kettle whistling. But today, nothing. Not even footsteps. Just silence thick enough to hear my own breathing. I adjusted my bag on my shoulder. Maybe he stepped out to the backyard, I whispered, though something inside me tightened unexpectedly. I touched the doorknob. That's when I heard his voice. Low, soft, almost tender. Not the tone he used with me these days. I froze, leaning closer without meaning to. The crack beneath the door carried the sound perfectly, as if the house itself wanted me to hear. Don't worry, he murmured. She's already on her way. I stiffened. He wasn't on a work call. His professional voice was sharper, clipped, controlled. This was intimate, relaxed, personal. My heart began to thud against my ribs. I shouldn't listen. I know I shouldn't listen. But something in his tone made my skin prickle, the same instinct you feel when walking into a room where someone had just been talking about you. I leaned closer. A second voice responded. A woman's voice. Soft, light, almost familiar. Oh, really? You're sure she won't come back? My breath caught so sharply, I almost dropped my keys. She was inside my home. Inside my home. I pressed my back against the wall beside the door, trying not to make a sound. A thin ray of sunlight stretched across the porch tiles, but suddenly it felt like the sharp edge of a blade. My hand trembled. I stood there, staring at the wood grain of the door as if I could see through it. What was happening? Who was she? And why did her voice feel like a whisper from my past, someone whose face I could almost but not quite place? I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing. Every part of me felt suspended, like the world had paused without warning. Then my husband spoke again, his voice dropping lower. She won't come back, he said. She never turns around once she leaves. She's too trusting. My stomach tightened. He chuckled softly, a sound I hadn't heard from him in weeks. And anyway, everything is already in motion. Everything what? I pressed a hand to my chest, trying to slow the panic rising inside me. My skin felt cold even though the sun was climbing higher. The woman giggled, quiet, restrained, as if sharing a secret. She trusts you too much, she said. You know that, right? My vision blurred for a moment. I felt winded, like someone had pushed all the air out of me. I took a tiny step back, confusion swirling into something darker. The kind of dread that feels like a warning. My husband, my partner of 6 years, spoke again, his voice suddenly serious. We just need to get through today, he said. By tonight, it'll all be done. Done? What would be done? My fingers dug into the strap of my bag. 100 thoughts raced through my mind, none of them settling long enough for me to make sense of them. Maybe it was an innocent conversation. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe. Then he said my name. Clear, sharp, intimate, followed by a sentence that shattered everything I thought I knew about my marriage. She has no idea what's coming. I thought hearing my name would be the worst part. I was wrong. What came after peeled something open inside me that I can never close again. I stayed frozen on the porch, breath trapped in my throat. The world felt distant, like I was underwater, listening to voices echo from above. My husband's tone was calm, confident, far too familiar with the woman standing in my living room. I told you, he said, she'll be gone by tonight. Those words didn't just confuse me, they split me. Gone. Gone where? Gone how? I stumbled backward instinctively, afraid he might suddenly open the door and find me standing there like a ghost overhearing her own fate. The quiet of our neighborhood pressed in around me. Morning birds chirped in contrast to the storm building inside my chest. My hands felt cold. My legs felt unsteady. Yet something inside me refused to run. I moved silently along the side of the house, where the living room window was slightly cracked open. I'd always told him we needed to fix that latch. Today, I was grateful we never did. I crouched low, hiding behind the rose bushes he planted for our 3rd anniversary. Their thorns bit into my palms as I leaned closer, but I barely felt them. "I just need her to leave," he murmured inside. "Once she's on that flight, everything becomes easier." The woman responded, her voice soft but edged with excitement. "Are you sure she signed the transfer papers?" My heart dropped so hard I nearly gasped aloud. "Transfer what papers?" I tightened my fist around a thorny stem, gripping it so hard my skin broke. I needed the pain. I needed something to keep me grounded because the world around me was shifting violently. My husband answered, "She thinks they're routine documents." A lie. A blatant crafted lie. I'd never signed anything except the travel clearance for my work trip, and certainly nothing tied to money. My money. I pressed myself closer to the wall, desperate to hear more. A sliver of their conversation drifted through the window, muffled but sharp enough to cut me open. "She'll be out of the way for a few days," he continued. "And when she returns—" He paused. Papers rustled. Chairs slid. I imagined their faces, conspiratorial, confident, ready to rewrite my life without me. "When she returns," he said finally, "everything will already belong to us." Us. Not me. Not him and me. Him and her. My stomach twisted. I felt tears threatening, but my anger burned hot enough to keep them from falling. Betrayal has a way of drying your eyes even as your heart fractures. The woman spoke again. This time, her tone sharpened, clearer than before, enough for me to realize why she felt so familiar. "I still think you're rushing it," she whispered. "What if she changes her mind and cancels the trip?" He laughed lightly, a sound that made me sick. "She never turns back once she leaves the house. She hates changing plans." The irony of his certainty nearly made me choke. If only he knew how close I was. If only he knew I was right outside, learning the truth piece by jagged piece. "I just want to make sure everything goes smoothly," the woman said. "Your share, my share, the accounts, the house." The house. My father's house. My childhood home. The only piece of him I still had. My pulse thundered in my ears. The woman continued, "Once the inheritance money moves, we have to keep things calm for a while. No rash decisions." Inheritance. They were talking about my father's inheritance. The same inheritance I'd only accessed 3 months ago. I felt a coldness crawl up my spine. My husband's voice softened, almost affectionate. "That's why we need her gone first. She can't question anything from overseas." My breathing turned shallow. Gone. Displaced. Silenced. The idea of leaving the country suddenly felt like a death sentence I hadn't realized I'd agreed to. A gust of wind pushed against the side of the house, rattling the cracked window. Inside, they fell quiet for a second. I held my breath, terrified they'd sense me. Then the woman's voice returned, calmer but chilling. "So once she's out of the country," she said slowly, "it's ours." Her tone carried not just greed, but certainty. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't a plan born yesterday. This betrayal had roots. Deep, rotting roots. Roots that were about to drag me into a nightmare I never saw coming. I thought the voice was just familiar. I didn't expect it to belong to someone I once treated like a daughter. My knees shook as I crouched beneath the living room window. The cold morning air seeped into my bones, but the chill inside me was far worse. My husband's words kept replaying, poisoning my thoughts, but now there was something else tugging at me, an instinct to confirm the identity of that woman. I lifted myself just enough to see through the small, cracked opening in the window. Just one glance. That was all it took. Afshin, my cousin, my aunt's only daughter. The girl I took in for 2 years after her mother died. The girl who used to sleep in my lap. The girl I bought school shoes for when her father couldn't afford them. My breath hitched so sharply that I covered my mouth with both hands. She was sitting comfortably at my dining table, my table, leaning close to my husband, her hair loose around her shoulders, her laughter soft and intimate. A laughter I had never heard from her around me. I felt something inside me tear. I backed away slightly, pressing my shoulder against the wall, trying to steady myself. But my heart was racing so fast it felt like it would shatter right through my ribs. The sky above the house brightened, casting soft light through the branches of the neem tree. It should have been a beautiful morning. Instead, it felt like a spotlight exposing my naivety. Inside, my husband slid a stack of papers toward her. "See? Everything is aligning." Afshin traced her fingers across my inheritance documents, my father's signature still visible on the old pages, while her eyes gleamed with something I never thought I'd see directed at me: calculation. She leaned back in the chair. "Good," she murmured. "We've been patient long enough." My throat burned. We? How long? How long had they been planning this? I pushed my back into the wall harder, grounding myself in the rough texture. A loud, painful truth was unfolding in front of me, and I couldn't run from it, not anymore. Afshin continued flipping through the papers. She's been too distracted lately. Too trusting. Too hopeful. The timing couldn't be more perfect. My heart cracked at each word. Distracted? Trusting? Hopeful? Of course I was hopeful. I thought my marriage was healing. I thought Afshin had grown into a kind woman grateful for the help we'd given her. I thought people I loved were incapable of this level of cruelty. Inside, they whispered, but the sound carried clearly through the window. My husband tapped the papers. "We just need her on that flight. Once she's away, we move fast. The banks won't question anything once the signatures match." My palms felt clammy. My stomach twisted. Signatures. Matching. Did they forge everything? How deep did this go? Afshin smiled, soft, smug. "You underestimate my part in this," she said. "She signs whatever I bring her." Her confidence cut deeper than any knife. Every moment from the past few months began swirling in my mind. Her sudden visits, her insistence on helping with my paperwork, her constant questions about my schedule. She had hugged me. She had cried in my arms. She had thanked me for everything I'd done for her. A mask. All of it. I rose slightly to look through the window again, needing to see more. My legs trembled, but I anchored myself with one hand against the wall. They were now side by side, shoulders touching, reviewing what looked like a property transfer sheet. My property. My father's house. The home that raised me and sheltered us both. Afshin nudged my husband playfully. "She's so easy," she said. "I could convince her the sky is green if I said it with a straight face." He laughed. Actually laughed. The sound hit me like a stone to the chest. For a moment I couldn't breathe. The betrayal wasn't just strategic, it was intimate. Personal. Sharp enough to draw blood even from afar. The wind shifted, brushing through the bushes around me. The roses trembled, scattering their petals like tiny pink warnings around my shoes. I stared at them, wondering how many signs I had ignored, how many warnings I had missed. Inside, Afshin lowered her voice as if sharing something deliciously cruel. "She'll never see this coming," she whispered. "She trusts me too much." She leaned closer to him, her lips curling. "She'll never suspect what's coming." I couldn't breathe as I slammed the car door shut. It felt like the whole building behind me was whispering about what I had just overheard. My hands shook so violently that the keys rattled against the steering wheel, a cold reminder that I was still trapped inside a life I no longer recognized, with every memory pressuring my chest like a warning I had ignored for far too long as I tried to pretend my marriage was still safe. I leaned back, letting the silence swallow me whole, and every scene from the past few months began replaying with cruel clarity. The late-night calls he stepped outside to take. The messages he hid behind a locked phone. And Afshin, always smiling too warmly, always appearing when my husband disappeared. Their closeness had seemed harmless then, but now it pulsed with meaning I could no longer deny as the truth tightened around my ribs with brutal insistence that I wake. I remembered the sudden pressure they'd put on me to travel for work, even though nothing urgent was happening in the office. My husband had insisted it would be good for me, a break from stress. Afshin had echoed him, her voice syrupy, almost rehearsed. Back then, I felt guilty for even doubting them. Now that guilt felt like a knife twisting slowly, reminding me how easy it had been for them to shape my choices without my knowing why. I wiped my face with trembling fingers, trying to understand how long this trap had been waiting for me. My father's inheritance, something I had barely spoken of, had become the center of their secret orbit. They must have known the moment I gained full access. They must have watched my every move since. The thought made my skin crawl, as if I had been living in a house made of glass, while they circled like patient vultures above me in silence. The car felt too small, too quiet, as the truth unfurled inside me like storm. I stared at the dashboard, remembering how my husband had booked the travel arrangements himself. At the time, I thought he was being thoughtful, helpful, loving even. Now those memories cracked, revealing something rotten underneath. Every suggestion he'd made, Every smile Afshin had offered, they weren't caring gestures but calculated nudges pushing me toward a destination I never chose or wanted to understand at all. A sharp sob escaped me before I could swallow it. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel, feeling the cold metal steady me. "Why?" I whispered, though no one was there to answer. Maybe I already knew. Money changes people, my father used to say, but I never expected it to change the people sleeping under my own roof. The betrayal sat heavy in my throat, thick enough to choke on, impossible to ignore any more than before this moment. Images flashed through my mind. Afshin lingering in the hallway, pretending not to listen when my lawyer called, my husband asking repeatedly if I'd finalized the transfer documents, their shared glances I dismissed as coincidence. Each memory now felt like a breadcrumb I'd stepped over blindly. I felt foolish, naive, like a child walking willingly into a trap simply because she trusted the hands guiding her forward. My heartbeat thudded against my ribs, loud and accusing in its steady echo. I lifted my head, staring through the windshield as the sun dipped behind the office building, painting everything in fading gold. It felt ironic, light touching a moment so dark. "They used me," I whispered, the words tasting metallic. Saying it out loud made it real heavier. I could almost feel the walls of their scheme closing in, built brick by brick for my trust. My pulse raced as the magnitude of their betrayal settled inside my bones like winter frost. Then one detail hit me, like a slap. The plane ticket, so casually handed to me the night before, had never been mine to choose. My husband insisted on covering the expenses, brushing off my protests with a forced laugh. At the time I thought he was being generous. But generosity doesn't hide receipts. And now that the fog was lifting, I remembered the brief glimpse I caught of the booking confirmation, the unfamiliar phrasing that had pricked at my instincts today. It hadn't been my name on the payment line. It hadn't even been my account. I felt the air leave my lungs as the realization took full shape, sharp and merciless. My husband's business card, his not mine, had paid for the trip they begged me to take. I stared at the ticket crumpled in my bag, dread seeping into every corner of me. If this was the beginning of their plan, what waited for me at the end of it now? I never knew a smile could feel like a weapon until tonight. My face looked calm, soft, almost grateful, while inside me, something sharp and cold pushed me forward with terrifying clarity. I stepped out of the car and walked toward the house, each breath slow and rehearsed. My heartbeat felt like a drum inside my throat, but my footsteps were steady, almost graceful, as if I'd practiced this walk for years without knowing it. My fingers were still trembling, so I hid my hands in my pockets, reminding myself that fear was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. The door creaked when I opened it, announcing me before I even stepped inside. Both of them, my husband and Afshin, turned toward me like they'd been caught doing something. Their eyes widened for the smallest fraction of a second before settling into a polite smile, the kind people wear when they've already calculated their next move. I forced myself to breathe just once. Then I smiled back. "Oh," my husband said, his voice too bright. "You're back early." Afshin tried to laugh, but it came out thin. "Everything okay? You seemed in such a rush." I shrugged lightly, as if the storm inside me had never existed. "Just needed a little air," I said. "And thanks, by the way, for reminding me about my passport earlier." The reaction was instantaneous. Their faces drained, first confusion, then panic, then an awkward attempt to mask again. I watched their throats tighten, their eyes flicker, the way guilty people do when they suddenly can't remember the script they rehearsed. My husband swallowed. "Of course," he said. "We were just trying to help." Afshin nodded too fast. Yes, we didn't want you to forget anything important." I smiled wider, letting the silence settle long enough to suffocate them. Every word I spoke next felt like a thread I was pulling, testing how quickly their lies would unravel. "I know," I whispered. "You two always think of everything." My husband's eyes darted to Afshin, so quick most people would have missed it. But I caught it. I caught everything now. The nervous shuffle of her feet. The way he pressed his thumb against his wedding ring. The way both of them tried not to breathe too loudly. I stepped deeper into the living room, pretending to admire the way Afshin had arranged the files on the table. "You've been busy," I said, my tone light, almost playful. "We're just organizing some reports," she replied. "Lie." Her voice was steady, but the muscle in her jaw twitched. I walked closer, letting my fingers trail across the edge of the table. You two make a good team, I said softly. My husband laughed too loud. We're just helping each other out. That's all. I tilted my head. Is that all? Really? The question hung in the air, invisible but heavy enough to crack their composure. My husband's smile froze. Afshin's nails dug into her own palm. They recovered quickly, too quickly, but not before I saw the flicker of fear. It fueled me. I leaned against the doorway, arms loosely crossed, as if I were simply curious, not hunting for answers. It must be exhausting, I murmured, keeping track of everything. The paperwork, the reminders, all the little details. Afshin forced a shaky breath. We manage. I let myself laugh, soft, amused, chilling. I'm sure you do. I could almost hear their thoughts racing, scrambling, searching for holes in whatever they assumed I knew. They didn't realize I was creating those holes on purpose, pulling them into the same confusion they'd spent months building around me. I'm going to finish packing, I said calmly, turning toward the hallway. Oh, already? My husband asked too quickly. I paused and looked over my shoulder, giving him a smile sweet enough to rot teeth. Why wouldn't I be? I said. You two worked so hard to make sure I'm ready. His jaw tightened. Afshin stared at the floor. I walked away before either of them could answer. The hallway felt colder than usual, the kind of cold that sinks through your clothes and touches your bones. My footsteps echoed against the floorboards, slow, steady, intentional. With every step, the truth inside me grew heavier, but so did my determination. I needed proof. Something concrete. Something undeniable. When I reached the study room, the door was half open. That alone was strange. My husband always closed it. Always. I pushed it quietly, letting the dim lamp light spill across the desk. Papers were stacked neatly, too neatly, like they wanted to appear untouched. But I knew the signs of rushed cleanup now. I recognized the tension of a cover-up. I stepped closer. Something caught my eye. A single sheet of paper peeked out from beneath a folder, barely visible, as if someone had shoved it in haste, hoping it would stay hidden. My stomach tightened. I pulled it free. And there it was. My signature. Perfect. Smooth. Clean. Except I had never signed this document. My breath caught in my throat as the room seemed to tilt. Because if this was forged, what else had they already done in my name? I realized then that fear can be a weapon, but so can calm. And I needed calm more than air. I leaned against the kitchen counter, the smooth marble cool under my fingertips. My husband and Afshin were in the living room, pretending to discuss something mundane. The way they moved too carefully, too deliberately, told me that their rehearsed performance was cracking, just slightly, like old paint under pressure. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the aroma fill my senses, masking the rapid thudding of my heart. Then I asked casually, so what were your morning plans? My husband looked up, blinking like I'd asked him a question about the weather in a foreign country. Plans? Just organizing some papers, checking emails. He paused, his voice slightly too loud. And Afshin wanted to review a few documents with me. Afshin's fingers fidgeted with the edge of the folder she was holding. Her eyes flicked toward him, then back at me, and I saw it, the tiniest crack in her mask. She was nervous, not because she was guilty, but because she thought I didn't know. Oh, that's interesting, I said, tilting my head innocently. I thought I heard some shuffling earlier. Something about signatures. My voice was light, teasing almost, but carried the weight of accusation. She swallowed hard. Yes, just, checking routine things. Routine. The word felt like a lie stretching over a gaping hole of truth. I nodded slowly, pretending to consider it. Routine. Of course. Her eyes darted to the side, and I knew I had her. I moved toward the study room, deliberately slow, letting them watch. Every step was measured, every movement casual, like I was oblivious to the storm I had already seen. Once inside, I pretended to make a phone call. Hi, yes, I'm just reviewing some stuff here. Everything's fine. Okay, thanks. My tone was soft, distracted, almost bored. But my other hand was working, sliding the documents from the desk, pointing the camera at each forged paper, and snapping pictures discreetly. My hands trembled slightly, but my mind had never felt sharper. Every line, every signature, every faint pencil mark became proof, evidence that would protect me when the time came. I imagined their panic when they realized I had it all. I moved silently, careful to leave nothing out of frame. The light from the desk lamp hit the paper just right, revealing the imperfections they hoped I would never see. I forced myself to breathe steadily, the kind of deep breaths I hadn't taken since learning about the betrayal outside the window. From behind the half-open door, I heard my husband talking again, trying to recover his composure. "We'll just finish these and everything will be set," he said, voice low, too casual, failing entirely to mask tension. Afshin's response came, almost a whisper. I caught it clearly despite the distance. "Did she see anything?" The words froze me mid-breath. I pressed my back against the doorframe, pretending to scroll through my phone. The camera was still in my hand, the papers safely documented. I could feel the electricity in my chest, the kind that burns when you realize the people you trusted are unraveling in front of you, and you hold the final piece of the puzzle. Her question carried fear, certainty, and a hint of desperation. She thought she had hidden everything. She believed I had been blind. But now I had the proof. Every forged signature, every manipulated file, every tiny detail that had been hidden from me. My mind raced, calculating the next steps, the safest ways to confront or reveal this without tipping my hand. But for the first time since the morning began, I felt a thrill, cold, sharp, dangerous, like standing at the edge of a cliff with the wind ready to push someone over. From my hiding spot, I watched them glance at each other, nervously aligning stories, smoothing over the cracks. My husband's confidence was faltering. Afshin's movements were jittery. Their lies were starting to crumble. I exhaled slowly, almost imperceptibly. My lips pressed into a tight line. And then, almost as if sensing me, Afshin's whisper floated through the room again, louder this time, urgent, fearful. "Did she see anything?" I froze. My chest tightened. The answer was simple. Yes. I saw everything. And I was ready. The room felt heavier, darker, like the calm before a storm that had already started brewing. I realized this was just the beginning, and the next move would decide who walked away unscathed. I didn't knock. I shouldn't have needed to. The office door was slightly ajar, the familiar scent of leather and old paper spilling into the corridor. Mr. Rashid's law office had always been a sanctuary for me, shelves lined with heavy books, diplomas, and framed awards on the walls, the faint hum of a ceiling fan above. But today it felt different. Darker. Weighted. Like the air itself was hiding secrets I was about to uncover. I stepped inside. My heels clicked softly against the worn wooden floor. "Mr. Rashid." My voice was calm, but my chest was tight. Weeks of unanswered calls, ignored texts, and now, finally, a chance to confront the man who knew everything about my father's affairs. Everything. He emerged from behind a large oak desk, his face pale, tired. His eyes widened as he recognized me. I wasn't expecting. Expecting me? I interrupted softly. "You weren't returning my calls. You weren't replying to emails. But I suppose you've been busy covering for someone." He flinched. The words hung in the room like a drawn blade. I moved closer, my hands clasped in front of me. "Did he threaten you?" I asked directly, though I didn't need to say the name. My husband's face was burned into my memory, the sound of his voice still in my ears from this morning. Mr. Rashid's hands trembled slightly as he raised them, as if trying to shield himself. "Yes," he admitted. His voice was barely above a whisper. "He'd pressured me, threatened me, insisted I release documents prematurely, promised consequences if I refused. I tried to resist truly, but his eyes glistened with regret. I felt bile rise in my throat. The man I had trusted to protect my father's legacy had been forced into complicity. But anger surged first, hotter than I expected. The betrayal wasn't just my husband's. It had reached out, touching everyone I thought I could trust. Mr. Rashid shuffled papers on his desk, avoiding my gaze. "I'm sorry," he said, finally looking up. "I know how it looks. I know it seems like I failed you. But your father, he always planned for emergencies. For moments exactly like this." He pushed a stack of sealed envelopes toward me. "These, he left behind, in case you were ever betrayed. In case someone you trusted turned against you." I hesitated. My fingers hovered over the envelopes. Each one was heavy with the weight of secrets, the kind that could undo a lifetime of trust and careful planning. I felt both fear and relief swirl together, like standing on the edge of a cliff knowing there was a net below, but might be too late to catch me if I fell. I picked one envelope, noticing the neat handwriting on the front. My father's hand. Steady, deliberate, unshakable. I traced the letters with my thumb, my chest tightening with emotion. A memory of his voice whispered in my mind, calm, warm, protective, as if he knew this day would come. Mr. Rashid leaned forward, his voice quiet but insistent. Whatever you do, handle them carefully. Some of the contents, they're not just papers. They're keys. Keys to the truth. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Did he know? I asked. Did he know my husband would? Yes, Mr. Rashid said simply. He anticipated everything. That's why these envelopes exist. That's why your father trusted me to keep them safe until you needed them most. My hands trembled as I opened the first envelope. Inside, I found a collection of letters, statements, even a few contracts that had been forged. But among them, nestled in a small, padded envelope, was something that made my breath catch. A USB drive, black and sleek, labeled in my father's unmistakable handwriting. For your eyes only. I stared at it, my pulse pounding in my ears. The letters I held in my hand suddenly felt heavier, almost sacred, but the USB, it was alive with possibility. Every fear I'd felt this morning, every suspicion I had since discovering the betrayal, seemed to converge in that small, unassuming device. What is this? I whispered, more to myself than to Mr. Rashid. He shook his head slowly. I don't know. Your father never told me exactly what's on it. Only that it's vital. That it contains what you need to protect yourself and to reclaim what's rightfully yours. I swallowed, trying to steady the shaking in my hands. The weight of everything, my husband's betrayal, Afshin's involvement, the forged signatures, the documents, pressed on me like a tidal wave. But now, for the first time, there was a glimmer of control. The USB drive gleamed faintly under the desk lamp. The label seemed almost to taunt me, for your eyes only. And in that moment, I knew my next step. I could feel the storm outside the office, the world I had been forced to navigate suddenly narrowing into a single, focus point. But just as I lifted the drive, preparing to leave, I caught the subtle shift in Mr. Rashid's expression, a flicker of fear, the kind that hints at secrets even he hadn't shared. I realized then, even with this proof, the danger was far from over. Because whatever was on that USB, it wasn't just evidence. It was the next move in a game I hadn't yet fully understood. And I had to be ready. I pressed play with a breath I didn't know I was holding. And then my father's face filled the screen, alive, speaking, looking straight at me. My heart cracked open. The video was dim, recorded in his study. Books towered behind him, and a small lamp lit one side of his face. He looked tired, thin, frail, but his eyes, they still held that fierce clarity I grew up depending on. For a moment, I forgot he was gone. For a moment, he felt a breath away. Beta, he began softly, his voice rough but steady. If you're watching this, then something has happened. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel as I sat parked on the side of the quiet road. The afternoon sun filtered through the windshield, warm on my hands, but my insides were cold. Completely cold. My father rarely spoke without careful intention. Every word was a step he'd chosen before taking. I don't want to frighten you, he continued, but I need you to be prepared. After I leave this world, greed will circle you. Not from strangers, but from within. From people close enough to know where your heart beats. A shaky breath escaped me. The world outside blurred slightly as tears pooled. I wiped my eyes quickly, forcing myself to focus. His gaze sharpened. There's a family member who carries jealousy like a shadow, he said quietly. A person who watched your blessings and felt they deserved them more. Afshin's face flashed in my mind. Her shy smile, her innocent eyes, or what I once thought were innocent. I gripped the USB drive still plugged into the dashboard screen, as if it were the only anchor I had left. But that isn't all, my father said, leaning slightly closer to the camera. There is also a partner with ambition. Someone who believes they can outsmart you. Someone who will pretend loyalty while drawing maps beneath the table. My breath hitched. He was describing my life. Exactly. Unmistakably. As though he'd been watching these last few days from somewhere beyond. He paused, coughing weakly. The sound tore through me. I hadn't been there when he recorded this. I hadn't even known he was preparing something like this. I tried to warn you gently in my last months, he said softly. But you saw the best in people. You always did. And that is your strength, but it can also be your greatest risk. My vision blurred again. His voice was a blade wrapped in love, cutting me because it was true. Outside the car window, a soft breeze rustled the branches. A bird landed briefly on a hood, like the world was unaware my entire life was unraveling and reforming at the same time. My father's hands appeared briefly in the frame as he adjusted his glasses. His fingers looked thinner than I remembered. It hurt to see them like that. Hands at once lifted me onto his shoulders, now frail and trembling. "I know you trust easily," he said, "and you give without keeping count. But that makes you vulnerable, especially when someone believes they deserve what is yours." Afshin's words from this morning, her laughter, echoed in my mind. She trusts me too much. And my husband's voice wrapped around hers, confident, assured, like betrayal was something casual. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. "In my desk," my father continued, "I left documents that outline everything. Everything they might try to take from you. Everything they have already looked at with hungry eyes." I remembered the sealed envelopes, the weight of them, the trembling in my hands. His voice softened suddenly, becoming almost a whisper. "You are not alone, Beta. Not while my words still reach you. Not while you're strong enough to face the truth." I swallowed, pressing a hand against my chest. It felt like he was sitting beside me, like he had gently taken my hand the way he used to when I was young and afraid of thunderstorms. He leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. A long moment. I didn't breathe. When he opened them again, they weren't weak anymore. They were sharp, determined. My father, even in his last days, had more strength than anyone I knew. "If there comes a moment," he said slowly, "when you feel something is wrong, when you sense betrayal or manipulation, you must trust that feeling. Don't question it. Don't doubt yourself." His gaze pierced straight through the screen. Straight through me. Greed makes people reckless. It makes them foolish. And it makes them dangerous. A shiver rolled down my spine. He took another breath. "Protect what I left you. But more importantly, protect yourself." My lips parted, trembling. "Baba," I whispered into the empty car, even though he couldn't hear me. The corners of his mouth lifted slightly, like he heard me anyway. "I raised you to be strong, to be smarter than those who try to deceive you. Use that strength now." A few tears ran down my cheeks silently, falling onto my lap, warm and sharp like little burns. "And remember," he added quietly, "love is not blindness. Trust is not surrender. And loyalty is something you will need to evaluate very carefully." My breath hitched again. He leaned forward, his face filling the screen. His last recorded words carried the weight of everything he'd lived for, everything he'd built for me, everything he feared losing. "If you're watching this," his eyes hardened, "protect yourself immediately." The screen went black. And in that sudden, suffocating darkness, one terrifying thought hit me. If he had prepared this message, then the danger wasn't just beginning. It was already here. I didn't stop shaking until I made a choice. Not to run, to fight. My father's last words still echoed in my head. "Protect yourself immediately." And for the first time all day, the fear inside me hardened into something sharper. Something deliberate. Something dangerous. I wiped my tears, inhaled slowly, and straightened my shoulders. If they wanted a trap, I would give them one. But it would be mine. As I drove toward home, the sky dimmed into golden blue, shadows stretching across the streets like silent witnesses. My father's voice stayed alive inside me, steadying my breath. I wasn't the helpless wife they thought they were cornering. Not anymore. Not after everything I'd seen today. By the time my house came into view, I had a plan forming. Not perfect, not pretty, but enough to get ahead. I parked as quietly as possible. The house looked peaceful from the outside, sunlit and calm, like it wasn't hiding two people plotting my downfall. I sat still for a few seconds, letting my heartbeat settle. "You can do this," I whispered to myself. When I stepped inside, I made sure my footsteps sounded normal. My breathing normal. My expression normal. I couldn't afford to let them sense even a crack. My husband appeared from a kitchen, forced smile, in place. "You're back early." "I forgot a few things," I replied lightly, lifting the small suitcase I'd intentionally packed only halfway. "You know how I am." He chuckled, but it sounded strained. Afshin peeked over his shoulder, pretending she hadn't been watching for me. Her eyes flicked nervously to my bag. I gifted them both a warm smile. "Don't worry. I won't bother you long. Just finishing up." Their shoulders eased almost visibly. I felt Bao creep up my throat at how eager they were to see me go. Upstairs, inside my bedroom, I shut the door softly. The silence felt thick enough to touch. I took out my phone, pulled up the photos of the forged documents, and sent them to the private investigator whose number my father had left in another envelope. Then, with trembling fingers, I forwarded the same files to the fraud department at my bank, including a voice note. "There may be unauthorized attempts to access or transfer assets tied to my inheritance. Please flag all unusual activity and freeze any pending requests. My phone buzzed with an immediate automated acknowledgement. Good. One piece in place. Next, I reached into the drawer where I kept old business gadgets and pulled out the tiny recording device my father gave me years ago for emergencies. I'd laughed at the time. He hadn't. I pressed the power button. A soft green light blinked. Okay, I whispered, my voice barely audible. When I walked back downstairs, I kept my steps slow and bored-looking, like someone preparing for a harmless trip. I placed the recording device under the decorative bowl on the hallway console table, right where their voices always drifted during their late-night plotting. Then I lifted my suitcase again and zipped it with a practiced, casual sigh. You two didn't have breakfast, right? I asked from the living room, pretending to rummage through my bag. My husband exchanged a quick look with Afshin. No. Just coffee. I gave a small, breezy laugh. I swear if I'm not home, you both forget to eat. I should make you a schedule. They laughed a little too loudly. Too forced. Like laughter could cover conspiracy. Anyway, I went on, glancing at my watch. I really need to head to the airport. My husband nodded, stepping closer. Right. The earlier the better. You don't want to miss the flight. His eagerness made my skin crawl. Of course, I said softly. I'll be gone before you know it. Afshin's smile sharpened for a second, just long enough for me to catch the truth behind it. I gave her a long, slow look. Take care of the house while I'm away. She almost glowed. Always. Their trap was tightening. Good. Mine was already set. My phone buzzed with a notification, but I didn't check it. Not yet. I said my goodbyes, walked out the door, and closed it behind me with steady hands. Once I was inside my car, out of their sight, I locked the doors and finally picked up the phone. It wasn't the bank. Not the fraud alert. It was the private investigator. A single text on my screen. You won't believe what I just found. My heart slammed into my ribs. I stared at the message, breath frozen halfway in my chest. Whatever he'd uncovered, whatever truth he was holding in those words, I knew instantly. This was bigger than forged documents. Bigger than greed. Bigger even than betrayal. And whatever he found, it would change everything. I never imagined the sound of my own husband's voice could make my blood freeze. But that night, it did, colder than anything winter had ever laid on my skin. I stood in the darkened corner of my driveway, phone pressed so hard to my ear it hurt. The tiny recording device I had planted earlier was now feeding me the truth I'd been afraid to face. A truth sharper than betrayal, because it came from a man I had loved for 12 years. For a moment, I forgot to breathe. The audio crackled, and then Afshin's voice slid through like poison. Oh my God, it's finally happening, she laughed. She'll be gone by morning. My stomach twisted. I leaned against the cold metal of my car, letting the night air steady me. The street lamp above flickered softly, as if even the universe hesitated to watch what was unfolding. Then my husband spoke, confident, rehearsed. Once she's abroad, everything transfers smoothly, he said. The bank shift will go through before she even notices. A pause. A clink of glasses. A soft, intimate laugh that once belonged only to me. I swallowed hard. Inside, something broke, but something else was born. A strength I didn't know I had. A rage so focused it felt like clarity. I listened again, needing to be sure. Needing to hear every piece of their cruelty. Afshin whispered, and the other plan? The accident. My heart stopped. He sighed, almost bored. We won't need that if she hands everything over voluntarily. She's predictable. Nervous. She panics easily. Predictable. Nervous. Panics easily. So that's what I was to him. A weakness to be harvested. I cover my mouth to stop a sob from escaping. My eyes blurred, but my resolve sharpened. The night smelled of dust and betrayal, and the silence around me felt too heavy for just one heart. I closed my eyes and pulled myself together. This wasn't the moment to fall apart. This was the moment my father had prepared me for. I straightened, wiped my tears, and stepped out of the shadows. The police cruiser rolled up exactly on time, its headlights cutting through the driveway like truth slicing through lies. My lawyer stepped out of her car behind them, adjusting her coat with the calm confidence I desperately needed. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded, though nothing inside me felt ready at all. But I had no choice anymore. I had to be. We moved toward the front door, each step heavy with everything I had just heard. The house glowed warmly from inside, mocking the coldness of its occupants. Through the window, I could see their silhouettes. My husband pouring wine. Afshin leaning against the kitchen counter like she belonged there. The same home my father built. The same walls that had heard my laughter, my dreams, my fears. Now they held my betrayal. My lawyer whispered, "Once we're inside, stay behind me. Don't engage unless necessary." I nodded again, gripping my phone as if it were a lifeline. My hands trembled, but my voice didn't when I said, "Let's end this." The officer knocked. 3 sharp, official taps. Inside, I heard chairs scrape. Muffled confusion. Then footsteps approaching. The door swung open, and there he was. My husband. His face shifted from surprise to irritation to something I can only describe as arrogance. He didn't even blink at the sight of the police. Instead, he leaned against the doorway, arms crossed casually. "Well," he said softly, "you weren't supposed to come back tonight." His voice sent a cold shiver through my spine. Afshin appeared behind him, her expression tight for a fraction of a second before smoothing into a smile. "Is everything okay?" she asked innocently. My lawyer stepped forward. "Actually, no. Nothing is okay." The officer followed, holding a warrant and a list of charges relating to fraud, conspiracy, and unauthorized property manipulation. My husband barely looked at them. His eyes stayed locked on mine, studying me like a puzzle he hadn't expected to lose. "You went through so much trouble," he murmured. "Recording devices, investigators." He gave a low, mocking chuckle. "You think this will end the way you want?" I didn't answer. I didn't trust my voice to hold the storm inside me. The officer moved past him. "Sir, we have questions regarding financial irregularities and planned travel fraud. We need you to come with us." Afshin's eyes widened. My husband remained calm, too calm. He stepped closer to me, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "You think you've won," he whispered. "But you don't even know the real game." A chill went through me. My lawyer placed a hand on my shoulder, pulling me slightly back, sensing his attempt to intimidate. But he smiled, slowly, deliberately. A smile of a man who believed he still had control. He leaned even closer. "I should have known you'd run back crying to your father's old warnings," he said softly. "He always made you paranoid." Something inside me snapped. I met his eyes directly for the first time that night. "My father was right," I said quietly. "About everything." For the first time, he flinched. Just a flicker, but I saw it. Afshin stepped forward, voice trembling. "What is happening? Why are they here?" "You said." He shot her a look that shut her up instantly. The officers moved to separate them. My husband held up his hands, as if surrendering. Not out of fear, but strategy. And then, right before they escorted him away, he leaned in one last time. Close enough that I could feel his breath. Close enough to hear every word. His smirk deepened as he whispered, "You still have no idea what's coming next." The words sliced through me. A warning. A threat. A promise. And just like that, the night didn't end. It cracked open wider. Cliffhanger. His final whisper echoed in my mind as the door slammed shut behind him. "You still have no idea what's coming next." I never knew freedom could feel this heavy. Some endings don't shatter you. They peel you open, layer by painful layer, until you're forced to face the truth you kept avoiding. And tonight, I finally faced mine. After the police took my husband away, and Afshin followed trembling behind, the house felt strangely silent. Too silent, like it had been holding its breath for months, waiting for this moment to exhale. I stood in the center of the living room, staring at the pictures on the wall, smiling faces, vacations, anniversaries. Lies dressed as memories. My phone buzzed with messages from my lawyer, the investigator, and the fraud division. Updates, confirmations, documents. Everything unfolding faster than my heart could catch. But I knew what I had to do next. I walked upstairs step by step, touching the railing my father once sanded by hand. He had believed this house would protect me. Instead, I had to protect myself from the people inside it. In my bedroom, the air still carried the faint scent of my perfume, mixed with a trace of his cologne. Toxic familiarity. I opened my closet and started packing. Not everything. Just what was mine. Just what I needed to breathe. As I folded the first shirt, my vision blurred. Not from sadness. No, sadness had burned away long ago. This was something else. A sense of mourning, maybe. A funeral for the life I thought I had. I whispered to myself, "You survived this. You're surviving it right now." My voice cracked anyway. The moonlight spilled through the window, illuminating the half-packed suitcase at my feet. It felt symbolic somehow. One life closing, another waiting. Downstairs, the investigator called. I swallowed, answering yes. He said quietly, "It's all coming together. The bank confirmed your husband attempted unauthorized access multiple times this week. The property transfer documents were forged. And Afshin, she's implicated too." My hands trembled around the phone. "Thank you," I whispered. He hesitated, then added, "You did the right thing. Just know that." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. After the call, I sat on the edge of my bed and let the silence settle again. This room had held my dreams, my arguments, my fears. But it couldn't hold me anymore. I zipped my suitcase and stood tall. Walking out of that bedroom felt like walking out of a decade. Down the stairs, across the living room, toward the front door, each step felt lighter and heavier at once. When I reached the doorway, I paused. Memories tried to cling to me like vines. Our first dinner party. Our first fight. The night he told me he'd always protect me, while planning to destroy me behind my back. I touched the doorknob and felt the cold metal bite into my palm. Then I whispered my first goodbye. Goodbye to the version of me who didn't know better. I opened the door. The night air felt new, like I was breathing for the first time. My lawyer stood outside, waiting beside her car. She gave me a gentle nod. "You ready?" "More than ever," I said. As she drove me to the temporary place she arranged, I watched the city lights blur by. Every street felt like a chapter. Every passing face a reminder that life doesn't pause just because yours breaks. At the apartment, she handed me documents, copies of statements, evidence logs, legal steps lined out clearly. "This will be rough," she warned softly. "But you have a strong case. And you have the truth." I inhaled deeply. Truth. The thing I had been denied, gaslit away from, manipulated out of. Now it sat in my hands, printed in black and white and undeniable. After she left, I stood alone in the quiet apartment, my suitcase beside me, the weight of everything pressing against my chest. I sat on the small couch and let my thoughts drift, backward, forward, everywhere in between. I thought of my father, his warnings, his video, the softness in his eyes even as he spoke of danger I refused to imagine. I whispered into the empty room, "You were right, Baba. You were right about everything." My voice cracked again. The next morning, the legal storm began. Meetings, statements, court filings, frozen accounts to prevent theft, fraud alerts, restraining orders. Piece by piece, the truth unfolded publicly, no longer whispered in kitchens or hidden in forged papers. The fraud evidence against my husband was overwhelming. Every signature he faked, every attempt to access my inheritance, every message between him and Afshin discussing how to handle me. Afshin tried to deny everything at first, but the authorities had the recordings, the texts, the documents. Her face when she realized she couldn't escape the consequences. It didn't bring me joy. It didn't bring me relief either. It just brought closure. My husband's downfall came faster than I expected. His company distanced itself. His partners cut him off. His reputation collapsed almost overnight. One reporter wrote, "A respected businessman faces charges of financial manipulation, fraud, and conspiracy." I stared at the headline for a long moment, feeling nothing but exhaustion. My lawyer asked if I wanted to pursue further charges beyond the fraud. I said quietly, "I want safety. I want peace. And I want my life back." That was enough. As days passed, I settled into the apartment. Small, simple, safe. A place where I didn't have to look over my shoulder. Some nights, I sat by the window and watched the city lights glimmer. I wondered how many people were living with secrets as heavy as mine. How many were trapped in homes they didn't know were cages. Slowly, I started rebuilding. Changing passwords. Reorganizing finances. Reclaiming property that was legally and morally mine. Every step forward felt like a quiet victory. One afternoon, I returned to the old house with my lawyer and 2 officers to retrieve the rest of my belongings. Walking through those doors again felt surreal. The house was empty now. No laughter. No lies. Just walls echoing with everything that happened inside them. I packed the last of my boxes. Books. Journals. A framed photo of my father. Before leaving, I stood in the doorway one last time. "I'm done," I whispered to the house. To all of it. When we closed the door behind us, something inside me finally unclenched. The life I thought I had was gone. But the life I deserved was waiting. I drove away without looking back. That night, in my quiet apartment, I finally allowed myself to breathe, really breathe. I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling, feeling the strangest mix of heartbreak and gratitude, because the truth had destroyed everything I knew. But it had also freed me from everything I didn't see. And as I closed my eyes, I whispered the words that had been echoing in my chest since the moment all this began. Sometimes God makes you forget things so you can finally remember who people truly are.